For our flipped lecture today, we will be focusing on family decline and the sociological imagination. In particular, I am focusing on vocabulary to facilitate today's activity. Sociologists ask, is the family in decline? But before we answer, we need to think critically. What kind of family are we comparing to? Often people refer to the 1950s breadwinner homemaker model as the ideal, but that was a historical anomaly. Using our sociological imagination, we'll explore how family structures have changed over time and whether those changes represent decline or simply transformation. Let's take a closer look at the idea of family decline by starting with that ideal. This was the dominant family form in the 1950s, where the father was the sole earner and the mother stayed home to care for the children. Today, fewer families fit in this mold. Does that mean it is a sign of decline, or is it a reflection of changing economic realities and gender roles? Consider this. In the 1950s, the majority of households were composed of married couples, and today, that percentage has dropped significantly. This shift is often cited as evidence of family decline. Increased family workforce participation is also a factor here. More women, including mothers, are now employed. This has led to a rise in dual earner families where both partners contribute financially. While this challenges the traditional mold, it also reflects progress in gender equality and economic necessity. Divorce, cohabitation, and single-parent families are more common today. These changes have increased the diversity of family structures. We could view that as a breakdown, or we might see it as an adaptation. So when we ask whether the family is in decline, we need to ask which family and by what standard. Using our sociological imagination helps us see that what looks like decline to some may be transformation. As marriage shifted from an economic necessity to a source of emotional fulfillment, we saw the rise of what's called companionate marriage. These relationships are built on love, mutual support, and a sense of equality between partners. This shift brought many changes: greater intimacy, shared decision-making, and more egalitarian roles. It also brought raised expectations. When emotional needs aren't met, people are more likely to leave that relationship. That is cited as one reason we've seen an increase in divorce rate. Does this mean families are weaker, or are people seeking healthier, more fulfilling relationships? Some key factors to consider in this argument is increased economic opportunity for women. As more women entered the workforce and gained financial independence, marriage became less essential for survival. This gave women more freedom to leave unsatisfied or unequal relationships. The women's liberation movement and evolving views on gender and family have made cohabitation, non-marital childbearing, and divorce more socially acceptable. Today, people are more likely to prioritize love, connection, and personal growth in their relationships rather than just financial stability or social obligation. At the same time, economic shifts, like the decline in manufacturing jobs, have made it harder for some men, especially those without college degrees, to be seen as marriageable. This has contributed to a decline in marriage rates among certain groups. The old model of the male breadwinner and female homemaker is no longer a norm. Many couples now share both economic and domestic responsibility. In essence, while economic factors still matter, the emphasis has shifted towards emotional connection and personal fulfillment. This has led to a more diverse array of family structures, one that reflects the values and realities of modern life. In early American families, the father was unquestioned head of household. He controlled property, made all the major decisions, and even had legal authority and ownership over his wife and children. This system is known as the patriarchal authority, and it was a defining feature of family life for centuries. As society has moved toward gender equality, this authority has diminished. Women have gained legal rights, such as the ability to vote. They've entered the workforce and began to share in many decision making. Today, many families operate on a more egalitarian model where responsibilities and power are shared. This shift is viewed in different ways. Some argue the decline of patriarchal authority has led to a loss of structure and stability in families. They point to rising divorce rates, lower marriage rates, and more single parent households as signs of decline. Others see this as progress. They argue that families are now more fair, flexible, and responsive to the needs of all its members, not just those in power. Shared responsibility can lead to stronger partnerships and healthier environments for children. Alongside this shift, we've seen broader changes in family structures: fewer two parent households, lower fertility rates, and more diverse living arrangements. These trends reflect not just personal choices, but deep social and economic transformations. So, again, we return to our essential question: is this decline or is it evolution? Industrialization changed everything about family life. Before this shift, families often worked together on farms or in small trades. However, when we moved to an industrial world, we had a new division of labor known as separate spheres. Men were expected to operate the public sphere, working, earning, and engaging in politics, while women were relegated to private sphere of the home, responsible for childbearing and domestic duties. These rigid gender roles shaped family life for over a century. The ideal became the male breadwinner and female homemaker, a model we recognize as the breadwinner homemaker family. However, as more women enter the 20th century, these roles began to blur. Traditional family structures changed, like dual earners. Industrialization also contributed to the decline of extended families. As people moved to urban areas for work, they often left behind their relatives and support networks. The nuclear family, just parents and children, became the norm. These changes also dramatically impacted family dynamics. Children were no longer expected to learn trades from their fathers, and the family's role as a unit of production diminished. Instead, families became units of consumption, focusing more on emotional support and caregiving than economic survival. So again, we ask, are these changes a decline or are they adaptations to a new social and economic reality? The cult of true womanhood emerged in the mid 19th century, that's the 1800s, and became a powerful cultural force in shaping women's roles in American society. It promoted the four key virtues for women: purity, piety, submissiveness, and domesticity. According to this ideology, a woman's highest calling was to be a moral guardian of the home, care for children, support her husband, and maintain a peaceful, virtuous household. This belief system limited women's opportunities outside the home and reinforced the idea that their value was tied to their roles as wives and mothers. And while we have moved away from many of these beliefs, echoes of this cult of true womanhood still shape how we view women today, especially in terms of family. For example, women are often judged more harshly than men for choosing careers over traditional motherhood. There's still an ongoing debate about who should be primarily responsible for childcare and domestic housework. Even in dual earner households, women often carry a disproportionate share of these responsibilities. These lingering expectations show how deeply rooted cultural ideals can continue to influence modern life, even as we move toward more egalitarian relationships. So, when we talk about family change, we need to ask, whose expectations are we holding on to and why? The tender years doctrine was a legal principle that guided custody decisions for much of the 19th and 20th century, and it held that young children, especially those under the age of 7, were supposed to be in care of women and their mothers. It reflected broader cultural ideas like the cult of womanhood and positioned women as moral and emotional centers of the family. Today, most custody laws are written to be gender neutral, and courts are designed to prioritize the best interests of the child, regardless of the parent's gender. But in practice, the legacy of the tender years doctrine still shapes how we think about parenting. Mothers are often assumed to be the default parent, while fathers may have to prove their caregiving abilities. This can place an unfair burden on both parents, mothers who want to share responsibilities, and fathers who want to be more involved. As we continue to redefine family roles, it is important to recognize how historical assumptions still influence our expectations and to ask whether our legal and cultural frameworks are keeping pace with the realities of our modern family life. As a twist, today's lecture quiz is simply a vocabulary matching activity. I encourage you to reference the Key Terms Chapter 1 PDF, which is at the top of week 4, the Family History module, to make this activity easier. So at the end, you have to remember, sociologists ask, is family in decline? But before we can answer that, we have to ask, what kind of family are we comparing to? What does decline mean? Are we comparing families to specific historical models? And how can we use the sociological imagery to explore it?